Hi, I'm Bob Miller with Tree of Life Health and the Nutrigenetic Research Institute. And I decided, one of my folks that I've run into, Martha McLaughlin, is very interesting in the work that she's doing. And so I decided I wanted to interview her and let all of you who follow me and or Tree of Life let you know about this young lady and a book that she's written. Let me first tell you a little bit about her. She's been a professional writer since 2006 with a BS and a master's in education. She's had more than 500 articles published online, and alongside with her husband, she served as a missionary in South America from the 80s through the late 90s. Now a widow with two young adult sons, Martha lives in Nashville, Tennessee, and enjoys outdoor activities. And I've known Martha probably for a couple of years, and I know that she has been struggling herself with some of the issues that she's talking about, and I believe that's what inspired her to write this book. So, Martha, thanks for being with us today and sharing with the people who are watching this video the book that you've written.
Well, thank you for your interest. Thank you for this platform to talk about it because I care about this issue so much. And also, thank you for introducing me as a young lady. I don't get that too much. That was fun.
Yes. Well. And until you're 95, in my book, you're still a young lady. So that is delusional, but that's one of my favorite sayings is mental health is very important, but delusional thinking about your age is totally acceptable. So
I agree.
All right. Our subject today is a book that you've written, clearly a label of love. It's called Chemicals and Christians. Why don't you show everybody the book?
All right. This is the book, Chemicals and Christians, Compassion and Caution.
Okay. Probably the first time a book has been written about multiple chemical sensitivity, specifically for a target audience, the Christians. So, there's a lot of interest in chemicals and the effects it's having on us. And of course, here at Tree of Life and in our functional genomic analysis, our major focus is looking at pathways that may be impaired that doesn't allow some people to clear chemicals. But it's interesting that you target it towards the Christian audience. What was the rationale behind that of addressing something related to Christians and multiple chemical sensitivity?
Well, really, there are two basic thought processes there. One is simply that those of us who have had to learn some of this knowledge the hard way, I think we do feel a responsibility to share it. And I think mostly we're going to be effective if we share it within the spheres of influence that we have, any arena where we might have a little bit of credibility. So for me, I think that's the Christian world. So that was part of the thought process. I also just am an idealist, and I truly believe that if Christians start really understanding these issues, they are going to be motivated to change. Because the Bible talks so much about caring for our own bodies. It talks about caring for our neighbors. And I think, lowering the toxic load is part of that. So,
sure. Well, I'd imagine most of the people watching this on our Facebook pages are familiar with what we do here at Tree of Life. And that is we spend a lot of time, looking at detox pathways, because I firmly believe that we're going to look back historically and see that unintended consequences of many of the things that we've done is having a tremendous impact on us. Particularly now, this is recorded in early July 2020, and many of us are just sitting back with amazement at some of the behavior of individuals, the anger, the cancel culture, the antagonism. We don't have debate anymore. We just have, very angry people all around. And I'm not singling out anyone in particular, but it just seems as though anger and emotional issues have gone to, astronomical heights. And from my perspective, I think that some of the exposure to some of the chemicals that our bodies just weren't meant for is having an impact on us. So from your perspective, tell us about why you think chemical exposure is becoming a serious problem for us.
Well, it is a huge problem. And there are many facets to it. I think one thing that most people really don't understand is how unregulated and untested most of the products that we use really are. We all know that the EPA regulates a lot of things, the FDA regulates a lot of things, so it's easy to assume that they regulate most things and most things that we're using. But if you stop and think about it, think about all the things that you use on your body and your clothes, in and on your home. They aren't food. They aren't drugs. So the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, does not have authority over them. The EPA, if you go on their website, they will say, we do not, have regulation over indoor air, only outdoor air. So there are, a few exceptions, like EPA does do some regulation of pesticides. FDA does do some things with labeling. But for the most part, the government relies on industry to tell them, we've tested this, we think it's safe, let's put it on the market. And, that's not a great system. It's just really not a great system. And even once things are proven to be unsafe, it's very, very hard to get them removed. So that's a big part of the problem, is that things just are not tested. We cannot assume if it's for sale, it's safe. It would be great if we could, but we can't. So
Sure, I'm probably showing my age by saying this, but there's that old saying, it's kind of like the fox watching the hen house.
Exactly.
That's exactly what's going on. So let's talk a little bit about, what do you think some of the health conditions are related to chemical sensitivity? Or first, why don't you give us the definition of MCAS, multiple chemical sensitivity, what that means?
Well, everyone is being affected by chemicals. Some people don't know. They don't associate their symptoms with chemical exposures, or they just have more subtle long-term things, like they're developing cancer, but they don't know that they are reacting to chemicals. But some of us react very obviously and very quickly and consistently. And that is a condition that goes by many names: environmental illness, toxic-induced loss of tolerance, but multiple chemical sensitivity, MCS, is probably the best known name. So.
Sure. And how many people do you think are ill, looking for answers, and they can't find them? And the problem really is that, it's chemically induced by things that they've been exposed to over the years.
Yeah, it's enormous. There have been a lot of studies through the years. The most recent one looked at 1,000 different Americans, and 26% said they were unusually sensitive to chemicals. That's more than a fourth of the population. And half of that, 13%, had been diagnosed with multiple chemical sensitivity. Those are huge, huge numbers. And those numbers are rising. I think it's 200% in the last decade rise in people who are self-diagnosed, 300% rise in people who've been medically diagnosed. So it's a huge and growing problem.
Absolutely. Now, one of the sad things that happens is that for some people who are sensitive, they often get pushback from friends and family members, because two people can be living in the same house. We see this all the time in what we do here with mycotoxins. One person is like, oh, the mold, and the other person says, there's something wrong with you. You're just imagining it, because I don't see anything. I don't feel anything. So in addition to the, health challenges or possibly even emotional challenges, they're ridiculed or told that they're imagining it, and that's very sad. So how common is that? I'm sure as you've talked to people, you hear that quite often.
Yeah, it's very common. It's not a well understood condition by the general population, or unfortunately by the medical profession. Only 25% of med schools require doctors to study any environmental medicine. And of the ones, is that right? Or 25% do not, but did not require any. And of the ones who do, it's like a total of 7 hours is what they get. So they don't understand it. So we're not getting validation from the medical profession in general. It takes a long time for people to figure out what's going on with them. So sometimes other people look to doctors to validate, So especially when people are looking for answers, it can be a very, very difficult, challenging time. So yes, we don't get a lot of validation and we don't get a lot of accommodation. And sometimes that causes people to put themselves in positions that are not safe for them, because we don't want to be labeled as hypochondriac or as exaggerating. So it can add to the suffering.
Sure. So how does that impact them? I mean, do they actually question if they're hypochondriacs, or they question if they're imagining these things? I mean, that mental torment just compounds the physical and emotional problems they're having from the chemical exposure.
It does, especially early in the condition. You do find yourself second guessing yourself. After a while, you've had enough consistent exposures, most of us stop second guessing. But yeah, in the beginning, it can be very challenging in the beginning.
Absolutely. And, of course, of the work that we do here, we totally recognize that, some people have genetic issues with their detox pathways. They have genetic issues that they're making more free radicals and their ability to detox becomes compromised. So what one person can clear, the next person has a very serious reaction to it, from, hives to nausea to all kinds of problems that it causes for them. What are some of the big offenders? I know I saw in your book that sometimes people go to church and someone behind them has very strong cologne on them and it just throws them for a loop. How common is that? And what are some of the other things that we would never think of that would cause a problem, that does cause a problem for those with multiple chemical sensitivity?
Oh goodness, the list is so long. But yes, fragrances are a good place to start because there are several thousand chemicals that can be used in fragrance manufacturing. And so if a product says fragrance on the label, that one word can mean there are 200 chemicals, making that fragrance. So if you want to start lowering your total load, fragrance is a very good place to start, synthetic fragrances. So, I'm talking air fresheners and plug-ins and perfumes, but also I read that the average person uses 12 fragrance products a day. So that's, your lotions, your shampoo, there's fragrance everywhere. So that's a good place to start.
Sure. I once heard the analogy that, your skin, whatever you put on your skin gets into the body. So you should never put anything on the skin you wouldn't eat.
Yeah, I think that's a good rule of thumb. I do.
Yes, exactly, because it does absorb into us. And, one of the favorite sayings we have around here is the 3D chess game played underwater.
Mm-hmm.
That it's usually multiple factors. Perhaps as a child had some mercury fillings that leaked. Then, they lived next to a farm or an orchard where pesticides were used. And it's just multiple factors. And I think when people are looking for the issue, they're not going to find it because it's usually multiple. And then combine that with genetic weakness and detox pathways, and you have that proverbial perfect storm.
Right.
Now, I want everyone to find your book and get it. So what I'd like to do is, very briefly, just a sentence or two. Let's walk through the chapters. And by the way, I was very impressed with the name you gave to the titles and what that relates to. So the first chapter one is called Sick, and briefly tell us what that's about.
That's about symptoms emerging. It's about people starting to figure out that they're getting sick. Symptoms come and go, and then they come and they don't go. And after a while, you figure out that they are interfering with daily life, and so you need to do something about it.
Absolutely. Then it's search. What are we searching for?
We're searching for answers. That's the stage of going to doctors and trying to figure it out.
Okay. Then we go through sifting. What is that?
Sifting is going through everything in your environment, in your home, trying to figure out what to keep, what to get rid of, trying to make your own personal environment as safe as it can be.
Okay. Then we need to separate.
Separate. That's the stage of figuring out that even though you can make your environment safe, you're not necessarily safe outside your home. It's, figuring out the problems with schools and workplaces and churches, unfortunately, and, what we can do to help people be able to tolerate those places.
Sure. Many churches, particularly old ones, have a serious mycotoxin issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to. It's like I'm doing fine until I went to church. And, I did that for my spiritual growth and, being with my friends, and they got sick because of the mycotoxin exposure. All right, let's talk about Strike. What an interesting title.
I wanted to start with that. Strike is trying to get well. You're striking out against the illness. And that chapter talks about, how to make decisions about what treatments to try, how much money to spend, that sort of thing.
Sure. Again, fascinating chapters. Sigh.
Sigh. These three chapters, the next three, sigh, scream, and seed. Those are the hardest chapters, probably the heavy chapters in the book. But sigh is figuring out that this is lasting longer than you thought it was going to. And, it's depression. It's sadness. It's figuring out that you have to make some significant changes in your life.
Mm-hmm. Then we scream. Tell me about that.
We scream, yes. We get angry. And, these 3 chapters, a lot of the things in these chapters relate to any chronic illness, not just chemical sensitivity. But yeah, I talk about things that make us angry, things that people unintentionally do to make us angry. And I talk about being angry at God and how we can deal with that.
Absolutely. And is there some of that why me in that as well?
Oh, yes.
What did I do to deserve this? And,
Exactly. Yes, we deal with that.
yeah. One of my favorite sayings when we consult with our clients, I tell folks I have 4 important words for you. You ready for that? And they'll say, yeah. And I'll say, it's not your fault.
And that's so important to hear. It
Yeah,
really is.
I've had so many people break down in tears just at hearing that. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, then we seethe.
We seethe. Yes, that's the stage of antagonism where it starts to seem like us versus them. And the challenge of that stage is to realize who, the enemy is misinformation and lack of information. It's not us versus them. It's all of us together against misinformation.
Absolutely. Then separate.
I think we did separate. Salvage is what we.
I'm sorry. Salvage. Yes. Gotcha.
Yeah. Salvage is redeeming the pain, finding purpose from the pain, finding things to be grateful for, salvaging body, soul, and spirit.
Absolutely. And then finally, smile.
Smile. That's the stage of taking joy in forward progress. Realizing we're not in this, not in this alone. We're in this together. Other people really are focusing on this issue. There really is progress being made, and there are things we can be happy about.
Sure. So it's obvious, who one of the core audiences is for this book, and that would be, individuals who get a headache or feel sick when they're around someone with fragrance,
Correct.
Or they go to a house that has a slightly moldy smell and they get sick.
Correct.
Or they've just been to 15 doctors and no one can seem to figure out what's going on.
Very true.
However, there's probably another group. I would imagine that there isn't a church around that doesn't have 1 or 2 people that have multiple chemical sensitivity. So I would imagine this would be a very good thing for church leaders who don't have multiple chemical sensitivity to read, to understand.
Exactly. I so want churches to be accessible to people.
Mm-hmm.
The spiritual needs are so great when, even for everyone, but when you're suffering with chronic illness and if you cannot enter the church building, I find that tragic.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's not only the church building, but, they get a new car and the car makes them sick because of the degassing, or they get new carpet. By the way, just as a side note, I tend to think that the concept of carpeting is one of the stupidest things we've ever done. Yeah.
We bought a house at one point in our life, and our plan was to rip it all out, but there was carpeting every square inch, the kitchen, the bathrooms, every square inch. It's like, who thought that was a good idea?
Exactly. I mean, firstly, it's degassing chemicals when it's new. It catches all the dust and dirt and mold and things. But
pesticides that track in from outside. That's
sure,
a big
but
problem.
we were, we grew up being told that to be a modern home, wall-to-wall carpeting is the thing. I'm down to 1 room in my house that has carpet, and so everything else is gone. And then of course we have we used to do plaster. Now we have drywall that degasses, and and one of the sad things is sometimes when people are pregnant, it's like, oh, let's get a room for the baby, and let's put fresh carpet in and fresh paint and all these kind of things, and oops, well intended, but possibly some very significant consequence. So obviously, this is a book for someone who's maybe experienced those things and didn't know why. But also, it'd be a good book for the person who is the friend or spouse of the person who's doing that, so they can realize it's not their fault. And church leaders, but even business owners. I mean, I've talked to many people who they live they work somewhere in a very toxic environment. They're around copiers and EMF exposure and coworkers wearing fragrances, or just an old building that maybe did they work in a garage or something like that, and the chemical exposure is just overwhelming. So obviously, this is a book that I'd like to see a lot of people read. So why don't you hold it up again so they get the name, Chemicals and Christians. Okay. And where can this be purchased?
It can be purchased online through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, christianbook.com, and Redemption Press. So, and right now, the Kindle version of the book is on sale through Amazon. So if you don't mind reading your book digitally, that's a good way to get it right now.
Okay, well, good. How long did it take you to write this, Martha?
Oh my goodness. It's hard for me to come up, because, with an actual answer, because I was, gathering material for so long. Actually, I had it almost completed before my husband died 6 years ago. And so the book just went on hiatus for a long time. And I picked it back up again last year. So it does feel like a relief to finally have it out in the world, because I have been working on it for a very long time.
Well, clearly a labor of love, and it must feel good to you to know that you're going to be improving the lives of others. Have you gotten feedback yet? Has it been out long enough that you've gotten some feedback?
Yeah, I just finished a blog tour where different bloggers reviewed the book every day, and that went really well. Yeah, I had an awful lot of people saying that everyone should read this book, and that's very gratifying.
Okay. One more time, hold the book up so they get the name of it.
Okay, do the Man in White thing.
Yes, there you go. Chemicals and Christians by Martha McLaughlin. So I wish you all the best with the sale of it, because this is a powerful, powerful message. Here at Tree of Life, we don't normally do these kind of promotional things, but I thought that this was so important that I wanted to make sure it got to as many people as possible. So Martha, thank you for that labor of love. I'm sure you put a lot of work into it, but just know that this will be a benefit to a lot of people for a long period of time. Is there going to be a book 2 or anything else coming out?
Who knows?
Yes.
Time will tell.
All right. Well, thanks for being with us, and best of luck with the book.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your interest.